And now we're going to dive into studying the forms of the eye area. I'm going to lower the opacity here, make a new layer. And it'd be kind of hard to do this without setting up the underlying structure first. So the main thing is knowing that the eye is just a sphere sitting inside the structure of the skull, right? So it's very important to know that there's this structure here, right? So in that case, to simplify that as a low poly, we have the line here, which represents the turn from this side of the skull to the forehead up here. It's not a perfect right angle, obviously. It's curved, but there's still a planes of the face change there, right? So kind of does something like this. If we just kind of cut out this whole area, the geometry goes inward like that. Very important. And it comes out again. And then the brow ridge is going to be protruding like that, but let's just make it low poly for now. Okay. It's going to be extended a little bit like that. And you could sort of just, for now, connect this as a straight, flat plane. Just so we understand the basics of things. Or this part over here, we're going to show the geometry like this because it's a plane change. Okay. And over here, we'll just be simplifying that down to that. Now, up here, we have also geometry doing this. And if we just take this and move it to the side, we can sort of get a feel for the shelf-like quality that the brow ridge has in this case. It goes down, then in, then down again, right? And the eyeball is, of course, a sphere. Like this. I'm just going to do a quick, very rough wireframe. It's smaller. It's as though it sits in there and we don't see most of it, right? Because the eyelids are covering a lot of it, right? And so let's see how big that is over here. Sometimes it's hard to tell, but it's actually pretty big, kind of like that. Or the way you can tell is that this part has the geometry of a curvature. I mean, it's not exactly following the shape of the eyeball, but it's still encompassing the eyeball because it's covering it like it's clay. So we have that. But let's just erase out, or at least make it lighter in the areas that aren't being shown in this case. So just very lightly erase, just to keep in mind that the eyeball is pretty big, maybe a little bit smaller like that. And we'll do a quick outline to show which part is being shown. Okay. Now, on that same sphere, let's actually bring that over here. In the areas that are being covered, obviously with eyelids, it's as though you have a thin sheet of clay like this, like it's like a strip of clay. Right, so it's a thin sheet. It's as though we have one of those starting here, and it sits onto the orientation of the eye. So the form of the eye is going to be rounded, so the form of this will also be rounded. So it kind of goes up and around and over it. And there's going to be a little tear duct here. All right, the eyelid has thickness, so we're going to obviously add thickness. And then the top part will go with the roundness of the eye, and it goes in to meet the brow ridge up here. And sometimes there's actually a little hollow space, not hollow space, but just a deeper part there, depending on the person, of course. Then the water fountain thing happens over here. Let's move this all this way. Right? And so same thing with the lower part. And we'll see what it actually looks like on the reference shortly, but it meets here and goes over here, and it has thickness like that. and we'll also follow the geometry. And of course, this can be blended in later on with geometry meeting it like that, depending on the person, and connecting with that nose area, right? Right, cool. Looks believable to me. But let's see what's actually happening in the reference. Okay, so we actually don't see the top eyelid here because of the angle. It's being covered by the brow ridge right here. But that form understanding still applies, especially with this reverse kind of cone situation there for the bridge of the nose. But you can clearly see the thickness of the lower eyelid here. It goes up like that. And we end up with something like this. Now, understanding it like this is one thing, but how would that help us if we're trying to come up with something from our imagination? And here's an example. Let's say we have a cranium, we have a center line, side of we got this kind of line here that represents where that cheekbone is. Right here. Well, let's put the jaw in first, because remember, that line kind of goes in like this, and then that gives us the location of where that jaw is. You just go this way and move a little bit this way, and that's where the jaw is. Refer back to the earlier lessons for that. Okay. Protrusion of the brow ridge, maybe nasal cavity. We got some cheekbones as parentheses real quick. Mouth. And we'll just kind of BS that real quick. But now, let's say I want to just concept a quick part of the face. Well, we could just draw the circle for the eye. Let's use the round brush instead so we can get more detail. All right, we can get the eye in there, but now we have all these options that we can do. We can make the upper eyelid straight across. We can make it rounded. And straight across would mean like the brow ridge is furrowed like this. But the thing to take note of is where the tear duct is and where it ends over here. This is what will change the personality of the character. If it's angled like this, you'll end up with an eyelid that does something like this, right? Definitely a more almond shape or something that looks, depending on the person, seductive or something. But if those same two parameters, the tear duct and the end of the eye, are angled upward, the character might seem a little bit more sad, right? And there's definitely a whole wide variety of different combinations of that. So you might have something just straight across that's just, somewhere in between. And once you have those, you can just draw the thickness of the eyelid, the lower eyelid, tear duct, and the roundness that would create like this. We got the sort of reverse fountain situation. We could get the brow ridge kind of sneaking over. And then over here, the geometry of the nose, the nasal cavity, because we know it's a cylinder there. So if we go from here, like, oh, what do we do? Do we make it a hard edge? No. You want a cylinder. Of course, you can change the shape of that. If you want to kind of come up with some different concepts, it's fine. And then, this side of, like, you have the frontalis, which is the front part of the forehead, and this part over here, which coincidentally follows the same location as that. You have this shape. You have the cheekbone shape. And then this side over here, which will be in shadow, depending on the light, and so on and so forth. All right, so if we shade this part of the eyelid, this part of the eye, that part of the top eyelid, it starts to kind of create some form that looks like a person or character or goblin, whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay, so let's just put some lighting on that real quick just to drive that point home. Light, not as light, but there's still light there, some light here. That's a giant eyeball. That's fine. For the sake of the demo. It's perfectly fine. Or maybe you want to design it to be that big. And one thing to note here is if you want this angle of the tear duct and the edge of the eye, that same angle should happen over here, but mirrored. So it's going to be something like that. Okay, so the ear could be there. Looks like that gray NPC guy from the memes. Anyway, let's go ahead and flatten that, get out of the way, and we'll go back to our reference and drawing. Let's just apply that geometry here. We know that the brow ridge, no, forehead, comes down like this, then inward, and tapers off right there. And just for the sake of this, we're just going to make this a flat shape, continuing the same geometry as this. All right. And on this side, we have geometry facing the other way. All right. Now we know that there's going to be a ball in there, and then the eyelid covering it here as well as here. So this is actually what I'm keeping in mind, or kind of sensing intuitively without really needing to do the wireframe. But do it like this as practice so that it's second nature to you. He looks like the Terminator with the red eye. Okay, cool.